You stupid.
They're not.
We have 11 letters from René Guénon to Julius Evola in a span from 1930 to 1951. Guénon was frustrated of Evola's views, and here Guénon confronts Evola directly. Evola claims to have read all of Guénon's books, but it seems like he misunderstands or rejected some significant aspects of Guénon's views. 24th of August 1930, Cairo, Egypt. You must have thought that I would not respond to your letter, which reached me in Paris little more than a year ago. The truth is, at the time, I was quite ill, and subsequently, different unforeseen difficulties and commitments of every type made me always delay every correspondence that was not absolutely urgent. Time flew by quickly, and I never succeeded in doing everything I wanted. I'm taking advantage of the fact that I am close to a little office in this residence to finally write to you, asking you to excuse this excessive delay. I have to tell you how little I was able to understand at all the interest that you showed in reading my books. Obviously, the point of view you are assuming is quite distinctive and certainly can't be mine. But I am pleased to see that it has not prevented you from getting rid of the anti-Oriental prejudice that you, by your own admission, used to hold. I wish that many others in the West would have the same attitude and come to an understanding the ancient doctrine of the Orient. You ask about Jacques Martin. Notwithstanding everything, I have always had friendly relations with him. As to ideas, we are in agreement, especially on negative point of views. That is, on anti-modernity. Apart from that, even he, disgracefully, is full of prejudice against the Orient. At least he was, because it seems that those prejudices since a short time ago has been attenuated. But something strange. It is fed by a type of fear in the face of what one does not know, and it is a disagreeable thing, because it prevents him from broadening his own point of view. But permit me to point out to you, from the moment that you read all my books, that after The Crisis of the Modern World, there's another, Spiritual Authority and Temporal Power, that was published last year. Currently, I'm working on the symbolism of the cross, that would definitely be published towards the end of this year. Excuse my briefness in my letter. I would like to be able to more or less get up to date with our correspondence.
I think we should improve society somewhat.
No!
23rd of February 1934, Cairo, Egypt. Forgive me once again for being late in responding to your letter that I received with pleasure after such a long silence. I have suffered from an acute eyesight weakness, and your letter reached me exactly that moment when I was able to read it, and only after a very long time. The quantity of things of every type had been accumulated while I found myself in that impossible situation of working such that, ever since, I have not yet succeeded in freeing myself from it, and to regain that lost time. I thank you for all your appreciation in regarding my work, and I think that in effect we can find ourselves in agreement, at least on what concerns the condition of the current world, and the necessity of a return to tradition and spirituality, if indeed it is still possible for the West, at the point in which things are currently reached. As far as living far from Europe, I cannot perhaps precisely take into account certain tendencies. I must confess that I do not exclusively trust in a renewal that, as much as I know of it, remains up to the point very superficial and somewhat confused. Above all, except for rare expectations, it is about vague and poorly defined aspirations, and it is very difficult to say what will result from it. But what is certain is that we notice in every general line how people are no longer so satisfied with the modern civilization, and that some beginning to doubt the progressive presence. As far as that goes, it is insufficient. Nevertheless, it is already at least something. Regarding the problem brought up in your letter, permit me to tell you with great frankness that these difficulties appears to me especially to derive from the fact that you do not make a very clear distinction between the religious point of view of the one hand and the metaphysic or initiatic on the other. Whatever their relations might be in certain respects, it is never necessary to confuse or mix them, since they refer to totally different domains, and they cannot consistently interfere with each other. The domain that defines religious truth belongs to what Hindu doctrine calls non-supreme knowledge. It is sufficient to put everything in its place and in its order, because there is no conflict possible. Above all, it is necessary not to forget that mysticism belongs totally to the religious ambit. Any comparison is therefore not possible between mysticism and metaphysics. The two ways, without considering the very relevant differences and their modalities, are not, in reality, absolutely marked out to reach the same goal, and the mystical union is not the Jivan Mukta, no more than salvation is liberation. Everything that is religious, including mysticism, concerned individual possibilities, in the indefinite extension of which they are susceptible and does not go beyond them. On the other hand, that is its reason for being. On the contrary, the reason for metaphysical realization is to proceed beyond individual possibilities. And this is why one can serve as the base of the other. Nor was it in the case for Christian esotericism of the Middle Ages, as it was always for Islamic esotericism. And in this regard, I cite this aphorism that seems to me to be perfectly adapted to the argument. As long as a man desires paradise or has fear of hell, he will not be able to aspire to the last grade of initiation. I must moreover bring to your attention the fact that the religious point of view is necessarily tied to certain historical contingencies, while the metaphysical point of view refers exclusively to the point of principles. To speak of multiple avatars is to stick to the domain of appearance. Nevertheless, in absolute reality, they are the same thing. The Christ principle is not multiple, wherever it can be made of its terrestrial manifestation of other types. The mediator, according to all tradition, is a universal man, which is also the Christ. Whatever the name by which he is called changes nothing, and I do not see what difference there is in regarding to this. The ascetic way would be, in its type, more comparable to the initiatic way of what is not mysticism, if only in that it implies a method and a positive effort. Mysticism, for its part, is instead totally the opposite, because of its positive character. The ascetic way can therefore be more preparation for a realization of another order, much more than a mystical way, which would even seem incompatible with that goal. But I do not think, on the other hand, that we can assert that some of what passes beyond elementary religion is open to all. Asceticism belongs only to some, and mysticism to some other. As to what is beyond the religious domain, it is obviously that it concerns much more restrained numbers of persons. Whoever finds his fulfillment at a certain level would make a very great error in trying to pass beyond it. That concerns the questions of a necessary hierarchy, against which all sophicism of democratic egalitarianism are impotent, though many of Catholics themselves today unfortunately are affected by this, and there is perhaps still a few of them who even suspects it. In regarding to your objection inherent in the domain of pure intellectuality, it is quite certain that it is even what it has as a goal. In that case, it is still necessary to make an essential distinction. The texts that you cite are revolts against profane knowledge, not against scared knowledge, and we absolutely do not confuse what is simply rational with what is purely intellectual. When I speak of profane knowledge, I understand it naturally, everything that is philosophy. Unless the spirit is blocked from all those things, the better. And certainly, and from the initiatic point of view, even more than the religious. It would be necessary perhaps to include also a good part of theology, insofar as it contains many useless subtleties, and it is of a still quasi-philosophical nature. In any case, everything that is discussion and controversy is of a purely profane spirit. That said, it is necessary to add that pure intellectuality eludes, on the other hand, the religious domain. This is another thing, and it stands to reason that sentiment and action have their part in it. Yet again, it is necessary to put all things in place that belongs to them, without allowing them any influence over a domain that is not theirs. Finally, pure intellectuality is in the same way indifferent in regarding both the pride and humility, two opposed notions that are of a sentimental order in the same manner. These who pretend the contrary show clearly in the case that they do not have the least idea of what is truly intellectuality. I see that you consider it as valuable as the incomprehension of P.A. It would be somewhat difficult to find a more limited spirit than his. Moreover, what a fine way of defending Christianity by continuing to deny that its doctrine reaffirms a higher meaning, instead of the nonsense of moral and social character that one admits too often to see in it. I do not see in what similar vulgarity would presuppose the intervention of a superhuman principle. Fortunately, I have for my part a better idea of Christianity than his. It is sad to see how persons of this type look to diminish all that is higher than them. The truth is too high to receive the least insult.